my privilege to announce that we've got Stephen Collins here tonight to do a presentation on Shakespeare. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy. Please remember to turn off your cell phones. Thank you.
If you cannot understand my argument and declare it's Greek to me, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you claim to be more sinned against than sinning, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you recall your salad days, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you act more in sorrow than in anger, if your wish is father to the thought, if your lost property has vanished into thin air, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you have ever refused to budge an inch, or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you've played fast and loose, if you've been tongue-tied at tower of strength, hoodwinked or in a pickle, if you've ever knitted your brows, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, stood on ceremony, danced attendance on your lord and master, had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing, if you've seen better days or lived in a fool's paradise, why then be that as it may, the more fool you, for it is a foregone conclusion that you are, as good luck would have it, quoting Shakespeare. If you think it is early days, and clear out bag and baggage, if you think it is high time and that is the long and short of it, if you think the game is up and the truth will out, even if it involves your own flesh and blood, if you lie low till the crack of doom because you suspect foul play, if you have your teeth set on edge at one fell swoop without rhyme or reason, well then, to give the devil his due, if the truth were known, for surely you have a tongue in your head, you are quoting Shakespeare. Even if you bid me good riddance, if you send me packing, if you wish I were dead as a doornail, if you think I'm an eyesore, a laughingstock, the devil incarnate, a stony-hearted villain, bloody-minded, or a blinking idiot, well then, by Jove, oh Lord, tut tut, what the dickens, for goodness sake, but me no buts, for it is all one to me, you are quoting Shakespeare. Thank you. People often ask me how they can get that. All you have to do is Google quoting Shakespeare, Bernard Levin. He's a professor at Columbia. He compiled all of that. All right, as some of you may know, 2016 was the 400th anniversary of the death of William Shakespeare. All right, he was born on April 23rd, 1564, and he died on April 23rd, 1616. Now, we do know definitively that he died on April 23rd, 1616. However, there is some question as to whether he was born on the 23rd. There is a baptismal record, but there's no birth certificate. And back in his time, it was extremely standard for people to get baptized 3 days after they were born. So they are assuming that he was born, because he was baptized on the 26th, that he would have been born on the 23rd. All right, now, I think it's important to just say a couple of brief words about the whole authorship controversy, not to spend too much time on it, but to at least address it. There are those who believe that Francis Bacon wrote Shakespeare's plays. There are those that believe that Christopher Marlowe wrote Shakespeare's plays. There are those that believe that Sir Walter Raleigh wrote Shakespeare's plays. There's a whole group of people, there's a society, they have meetings and conferences every year. They call themselves the Oxfordians. And the Oxfordians believe that the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere, wrote the plays. A critic was once talking to, or a journalist rather, was once talking to Bill Moyers. And he said, Mr. Moyers, what do you think of this whole authorship controversy? And he said, frankly, I'm tired of it. He said, I don't care if Mickey Mouse wrote the plays. I'm glad that we just have them. All right, now another thing to keep in mind is in Shakespeare's day, there were no directors. The notion of a man, or a woman for that matter, directing a play, that really doesn't happen until 100 years after Shakespeare. All right, and also, no women were allowed on the stage. So, of course, the beautiful, Juliet and Rosalind and Celia and Beatrice and the whole pantheon of Shakespeare's female characters were played by young boys, often prepubescent boys, maybe 13 or 14 years old, all right? So in Shakespeare's day, the plays were also performed what time of day? Afternoon. Why? Because the power of electricity had not yet been harnessed. So you couldn't do a play in the evening. All right? So when you went to a play in the Elizabethan age, it was incumbent upon you to use your imaginations. And I say when we go to the theater today, a lot of the imaginative work that Shakespeare's audience would have had to done on their own, it's done for you. There are machines that make smog and rain and smoke, and there's all kinds of sophisticated lighting panels. In Shakespeare's day, there was the stage. There might have been some nice costumes, but very little in the way of stage props or sets. So you had to use your imagination. The chorus in the beginning of Henry V, it basically is instructing you as an audience what you have to do. This is what you first hear at the beginning of Henry V. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentle Saul, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cast that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon, since your crooked figure can attest in little place 1,000,000, and let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose, within the girdle of these walls, are now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts, into 1,000 parts divide one man, and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, you see them, printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass, for the which supply admit me, chorus to this history, who prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. Thank you. So I told you in Shakespeare's day there were no directors. And yet, in one of my favorite speeches from Hamlet, it's referred to as Hamlet's advice to the players. A group of traveling players is coming to Elsinore to perform a play called The Murder of Gonzago. Now, Act 1, Scene 2, Hamlet is visited by what he believes is the ghost of his father. And the ghost tells him in rather grisly detail about his murder by his brother, Claudius, Hamlet's uncle Claudius. So Hamlet wants to take his revenge, but he wants to make absolutely certain that Claudius is guilty. So he gives these players a scene which will depict the way his father told him he was killed, which was poison being poured in the porch of his ear. So Hamlet wants these players to not just do a creditable job, but he wants them to do an extraordinary job. And he essentially instructs them in how they're going to do that. And he says to them, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it as some of your players do, I had as lief the town cry as spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand thus, but use all gently. For in the very torrent tempest, and as I may say whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance that may give it smoothness. Oh, it offends me to the soul to hear a robustious, periwig-pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ears of the groundlings who for the most part are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. I would have such a fellow whipped, or doing termagant it out Herod's Herod. Pray you avoid it. Be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance, that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature, for anything so or done is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is, to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her own features, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. Now this o'erdone, or come tardy off, though it make the unskilful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of the which one must, in your allowance, overweigh a whole theatre of others. Oh, I've seen plays play, and heard others praise, not to speak it profanely, that having neither the accent of Christian nor the gait of Christian pagan or man have so strutted and bellowed, I thought some of nature's journeymen had made men, and not made them well. They imitated humanity so abominably. And let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them, for there be of them that will themselves laugh, to set upon some quantity of barren spectators to laugh also, though in the meantime some important question of the play be then to be considered. That's monstrous. Shows a pitiful lack of understanding in those who undertake it. Go. Make ready. Yes, Christ, go. Go. Look at the smile. All right. All right, if William Shakespeare or Mickey Mouse or whoever it is that wrote the plays, if he'd never written a single play, he'd still be famous in the annals of English literature for the composition of 154 sonnets. Taken as a whole, the sonnets represent a profound meditation on time, aging, and flux. And so I'd like to do 4, 5, 6, I don't know, of my favorite Shakespeare sonnets. I'm sure you recognize some of them. Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. And this, of course, is the sonnet, and by extension, the whole 154 sonnets. And I would say that Shakespeare was in full command of his poetic powers and knew 400 years ago that I'd be here tonight in the West Boylston Library doing his sonnets. Hi. Sonnet 29. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. For in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark, at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. Thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. And Sonnet 73 is a profound meditation I'm getting old. Some of us are getting old. Oh my God, now I'm having a moment here. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. There ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, which seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. And what's brilliant about that sonnet, to love that well which thou must leave ere long, I mean, he's not only talking about that the beloved is perhaps going to die, but he's also talking about leaving what? Life. Leaving this. So that love it. Love it while you have it, right? All right, how many people saw the movie Shakespeare in Love? Yeah, fabulous, fabulous movie. In Shakespeare's time, everybody but everybody was trying to write sonnets. And that came across so magnificently in the movie Shakespeare in Love, where the gondolier says, "Master Shakespeare, I've written some sonnets. I'd like you to read them and tell me if you think they are worthy." And Joseph Fiennes, the actor playing Shakespeare, you see him roll his eyes as if to say, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to read these god-awful, bad sonnets." So Shakespeare in Sonnet 130 is poking fun, I think, at himself, and poking fun at the notion that language can ever adequately describe our feelings, particularly our amorous feelings. He's also poking fun of the Italian sonnets of Petrarch from 2 centuries earlier. I'm not a scholar of Petrarch, but I've read some of them in translation. Of course, I don't speak Italian or read Italian. And the language tends to be really, really, really overblown. And Shakespeare's making fun of that, I'm sure he is. When my love swears, oh no, that's 138, excuse me. I'm going to do that next. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I've seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks, and in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belie with false compare. So what's he saying so wonderfully? Love, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. All right, I teach a lot of literature seminars at retirement communities. And, this next sonnet, I think, speaks really eloquently to a lot of the people. I teach some people that are in their 90s. I teach at a place where there's a woman who's 102, and she is sharp as a tack. Anyway, here's Sonnet 138. When my love swears that she's made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore says not I that I am old Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. And the brilliance of the double entendre on lie. I lie with her, sexually, we are lovers, but I lie to her, darling, you look the same as you did when I met you 40 years ago. And sweetheart, you too, you haven't aged a day. Okay, all right, let's get into something serious here for a moment. Richard II had been in Northern Ireland squelching a rebellion. He thought it was only going to take a couple of weeks, or at most a couple of months. Instead, it has gone on almost a year. In his absence, his cousin Henry Bolingbroke, who will eventually become King Henry IV, and who earlier in the play was sent into exile by Richard for insubordinate behavior, he comes back to England with the express purpose of usurping the throne from Richard. And historically, we know that there was a crop failure. And we also know historically that the state of the English army was greatly depleted because of this Irish insurrection. So Bolingbroke comes back and gathers forces that are really, really angry because people are hungry. There's no crops. So Richard's back from Ireland now. What used to be his strong, powerful army is now a ragtag remnant, and they've just narrowly put off the forces of Bolingbroke. Richard's expecting reinforcements, and a courier arrives to tell him not only are the reinforcements not to be forthcoming, but they have indeed defected over to the side of Henry. So Richard, knowing he's between a rock and a hard place because a king without an army is not much of a king, makes this speech to what's left of his troops. Of comfort no man speak. Let's talk of graves, of worms and epitaphs. Make dust our paper, and with rainy eyes write sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Let's choose executors and talk of wills, and yet not so. For what can we bequeath save our deposed bodies to the ground, our lands, our lives, and all our Bolingbroke's, and nothing can we call our own but death, and that small model of the barren earth which serves as paste and cover to our bones. For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings, how some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghost they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court. And there the antic sits, scoffing his state, grinning at his pomp, allowing him a breath, a little scene to monarchize, be feared, and kill with looks, infusing him with self and vain conceit, as if this flesh, which walls about our life, were brass impregnable. And humid thus comes at the last, and with a little pin bores through his castle wall. And farewell, king. Cover your heads, and mock not flesh and blood with solemn reverence. Throw away respect, tradition, form, and ceremonious duty. For you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread, like you, feel, want, taste, grieve, need friends. Subjected thus, how can you say to me, I am a king? And if you look at the punctuation, it's not I am a king, period. It's not I am a king, exclamation point. It's I am a king, question mark. The speech is really his informal abdication speech. How can you say to me, I am a king? The crown, and he refers to it as the hollow crown, the crown's just a piece of jewelry, unless the head that it's sitting on wields power. I'm convinced that T.S. Eliot, when he wrote his poem, The Hollow Men, I'm thinking he was thinking of Shakespeare's Hollow Crown. Anyway, I've seen a lot of productions of Hamlet, professional productions, high school productions. Some of the best Hamlet productions I've seen have been high school productions. Absolutely. About 7 years ago, I saw the junior company of Shakespeare and Company out in Lenox. They were touring around, and I happened to just be in Starbucks in Concord one day, which is where I memorize a lot of text, because the caffeine helps, and if I go to a library, I fall asleep. You know, if I try to do it at home, I'll turn on the boob tube. So I was in there one day, and there was this very, very attractive young woman. I want to guess she was 22, 23. And I saw she had a copy of Hamlet. And I said, oh, you're in Hamlet? She said, yes. And I said, you're playing Ophelia? She smiled and she said, no, I'm playing Hamlet. And they did it at the Littleton Lyceum, which is one of the oldest lyceums in the country. They cut it down to 90 minutes with no acts, with no, no intermissions. They really cut the hell out of it, but they did a really good job. And everybody played multiple characters except for her. And so I went to see it, and she had her hair in a pigtail, and she had it going down behind her shirt. And I didn't for a moment see a woman. I saw Hamlet. She was exquisite. Oh my God. Anyway, the whole point of this is that I think Polonius often gets played the wrong way. I think a lot of people play him, and directors, have actors present him as this bumbling, stumbling fool. And I don't think he's a bumbling, stumbling fool at all. In fact, I think he's a concerned father. His daughter is falling in love with this guy who seemingly is losing his mind. He's just being a concerned father. Now, at the beginning of the play, Laertes is home from college. I work with young audiences in Massachusetts, so when I work with kids to make it, meaningful for them, I say Laertes is home from college on spring break. But he has to go back. And the ship is in the harbor, it's ready to sail. And Polonius sees that Laertes is dilly-dallying, procrastinating. So he takes this opportunity to chide him for that. And I think he thinks, if I have his attention, I'll try to give him just the kind of advice that 22-year-olds don't want from their fathers. Trust me, my son is going to be 20 in July. He's a sophomore in college. So I love this, and I'm sure that, some lines from this, you're going to just say, oh yeah, there they are. So he said, yet here, Laertes aboard for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sails, and you are stayed for there. My blessing with thee, and these few precepts in thy memory look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought is act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul like hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged comrade. Beware of a quarrel, but once in it, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit, as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy. For the apparel oft proclaims the man, and they in France, of the best rank and station, are of a most select and generous chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man So I think people have this sort of conversation with themselves all the time, particularly actors. Who gets the best lines in Shakespeare? Is it the clowns or the villains? I say the villains pretty much get the best lines in Shakespeare. So I'm going to do 3 of Shakespeare's villains, back to back to back. Richard III, Claudius, and Iago. And if you know the play Richard III, Richard is actually following the funeral procession, and Lady Anne Neville is going to the cemetery to bury her father-in-law, who was killed by who? Richard III. 3 months before that, Richard III killed her husband, Edward. Now he's following her to the grave, and he's wooing her and whispering sweet nothings in her ear. And it's one of the, I mean, talk about somebody having the chic, the audacity to woo someone after you've killed the husband and the father-in-law. So they get to the cemetery, and he basically gets down on his hands and knees, he rips open his bodice, he gives her his dagger, and he says, listen, the reason I killed them both is because I love you so much. And so here, if you think I did the wrong thing, here's my knife, kill me. But if you don't kill me, then I'm going to get up and presume at some point you'll be my wife. Well, of course she doesn't kill him because she doesn't have the wherewithal to take a knife and to gouge it into a man's chest. And she eventually does become his wife, you know, more out of fear, I think, for her own life. And if you know the politics of the time, you can probably see that. But anyway, she leaves, and he's by himself. And when a Shakespearean character is by himself and they talk, it is what? A soliloquy. So he's by himself, feeling quite good about himself. And he says, was ever woman in this humor wooed? Was ever woman in this humor won? I'll have her, but I'll not keep her long. What, I that killed her husband and his father, to take her at her heart's extremest hate, with curses in her mouth, tears in her eyes, and the bleeding witness of my hatred by, having God her conscience, and these bars against me, and I no friends to back my suit with all but the plain devil and dissembling looks, and yet to win her, all the world to nothing. Ha! Has she forgot already Edward, that brave prince, whom I some 3 months since stabbed in my angry mood at Tewkesbury? A sweeter and lovelier gentleman framed in the prodigality of nature, young, valiant, wise, and no doubt right noble, the spacious world cannot again afford. And will she yet abase her eyes on me, the crop, the golden prime of this sweet prince, and made her widow to a woeful bed on me, that halts and in misshapen thus? My dukedom to a beggarly denier, I do mistake myself all this while. Upon my life, she finds, although I cannot, myself to be a marvelous proper man. Albeit charges for a looking glass, and entertain a score or two of tailors to study fashions to adorn my body. Since I'm crept in favor with myself, I will maintain it with some little cost. But first, I'll turn yon fellow in his grave, and then return lamenting to my love. Shine out, fair sun, till I've bought a glass, that I may see my shadow as I pass. So I was talking about Hamlet earlier. So the play within the play. Hamlet's going to watch Claudius intently to see if he becomes distraught. Well, of course he does. Once he sees the person pour the poison in the ear, he knows that Hamlet knows that he killed his father. All right? In the play, it's referred to as the mouse trap, or the play within the play, wherein he will catch, very good, sir, the conscience of the king. All right? So, Claudius rushes to the chapel to try to make an act of confession. Oh, my offense is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent, and like a man to double business bound, I stand and pause where I shall first begin. What if this wretched hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Whereto serves mercy but to confront the visage of offense? And what's in prayer but this twofold force? To be forestalled ere we fall, or pardon being down. Then I look up. My fault is in the past. But oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn when I'm still possessed of the effects for which I did the murder? My crown, my queen, and mine own ambition. Can one be pardoned and retain the offense? In the corrupted currents of this world, offense's gilded hand oft shoves by justice, and oft 'tis seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law, but 'tis not so above. There is no shuffling. There the fault lies in its true nature, and we ourselves compelled even to the teeth and foreheads of our faults to give in evidence. What then? What rest? Try what repentance can, what can it not? But what can it when one cannot repent? Oh, wretched state. Oh, bosom black as death. Oh, limed soul that's struggling to be free art more engaged. Help! Angels, make us say, bow, stubborn knees, heart with strings of steel, be soft as sinners of the newborn babe. All may be well. My words fly up. My thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. So clearly, the most diabolical, evil character in all of Shakespeare is hands down Iago. He is a psychopath, a sociopath, a Machiavel. He delights in evil for evil's sake. My son, who's now a sophomore in college, when he graduated from the 8th grade, there was a beautiful production of this being done at this theater in the South End. And I took my son, and when we were walking back to the car, he looked at me and he said, "Dad, how could he be so stupid?" Othello. And in that moment, I felt really proud because my son, as an 8th grader, got the essence of the play. How could he be so stupid? Othello believes that Iago is his good friend. Now, Iago's been passed over for a promotion to lieutenant. Instead, the promotion has gone to Michael Cassio. And Iago is just so wounded, his pride is so hurt. Act 1, Scene 1. Iago is having a conversation with Rodrigo, Rodrigo thinks that Iago is his good friend, but Rodrigo will come to his demise and his death also because of Iago. This is a paraphrase, but Rodrigo basically says to him, you know, given that you didn't get that promotion to lieutenant, I'm really surprised that you're still paying homage and you're still loyal to Othello. And Iago, in bold language, says to him, "Oh, sir, content you. I follow him to serve my turn upon him. We cannot all be masters, nor all masters cannot be truly followed. You shall mock many a duteous and knee-crooking knave, that doting on his own obsequious bondage, wears out his time much like his master's ass. for naught but provender, and when he's old, cashiered. Whip me such honest knaves. Others there are, who trimmed in the forms and visages of duty, keeping yet their attention on themselves, and throwing but shows of service on their lords, do well thrive by them. And when they've lined their pockets, do themselves homage. These fellows have some soul. Such a one do I profess myself. For, sir, 'tis as sure as you are Rodrigo, were I the Moor, I would not be Iago. In following him, I follow but myself. Heaven is my judge. Not I for love and duty, but seeming so, for mine own peculiar end. For when my outward action doth demonstrate the native act and figure of my heart in compliment extern, 'tis not long after, but I will wear my heart upon my sleeve, for daws to peck at. I am not what I am. So sometimes watching Shakespeare or just reading the plays, I just get overwhelmed. I have a Shakespeare. You ever read those book reviews on, the Times, and they ask the writer what books are on your shelf? You've read those, right? So on right next to my bed, I always have Shakespeare. And a lot of nights if I have insomnia, and unfortunately it happens more than I like to admit, I read Shakespeare. And the beauty, the absolute beauty and the musical quality of the language is overwhelming. So 3 short pieces to hopefully illustrate that. The first one is Bassanio entreating Antonio, the merchant, to lend him money. Because Bassanio wants to go woo Portia, but he's down on his luck. He needs a new suit of clothes. He needs a horse. So he's going to get the money from his good friend. And his description of Portia is just so exquisite. In Belmont is a lady richly left, and she is fair, and fairer than that of wondrous virtue. Sometimes from her eyes I did receive fair, speechless messages. Her name is Portia. Nothing undervalued to Cato's daughter, Brutus's Portia, nor is the wide world ignorant of her worth. For the 4 winds blow in from every coast renowned suitors, and her sunny locks hang from her temples like a golden fleece, and many Jasons come in quest of her. Oh, my Antonio, had I but the means to hold a rival place with one of them, I have a mind presages me such thrift that I should questionless be fortunate. How about Oberon's description of Titania's bower? Oberon's the king of the fairies, and Titania's the queen of the fairies. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows, quite over canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses, and with eglantine. There sleeps Titania, sometimes of the night, lulled in these flowers with dances and delight. And there the snake throws her enameled skin, weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in. And with the juice of this, I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasies. All right, Hamlet's speeches, to be or not to be, now I'm alone, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. They're all brilliant, but my favorite Hamlet speech is the short speech he delivers to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They were his friends, his college buddies, his friends, but Hamlet knows they've been summoned by Gertrude and Claudius to spy on him. And so is Hamlet descending into madness, or is he just playing madness to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? But I just love his description of the depressed, melancholic state. I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth, forgone all custom of exercise, and indeed it goes so badly with my disposition, that this goodly frame, the earth, seems to me no more than a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave or hanging firmament, this golden majestical roof fretted with fire, why it appears to me no more than a foul, pestilent congregation of vapors. What a piece of works, man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and function, how express and admirable in action, how like an angel in apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the earth, the paragon of animals. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delight not me. No, nor woman neither. Though by your smiling you seem to say so. All right, we need a little comedy now. All right, so many, many years ago, I worked with a theater in Boston. We were called the Ever Theater. And the guy who directed the theater, a very, very talented man named Charles Boyle, he tragically had a massive stroke when he was 49 years old and lost a lot of his verbal functioning and, of course, his ability to move. Just such a sad thing. Charles was one of those Oxfordians, and he tried to convert all the actors into believing that the 17th Earl of Oxford wrote the plays. So I bought that nonsense for a while, but now I'm back believing that it's the man from Stratford. But in any event, we did a production of As You Like It. The same time the, what's the theater connected with BU? Huntington. The same time the Huntington Theater was doing their production of As You Like It. And the critic from the Phoenix liked our little production. We performed at the Emmanuel Church on Newbury Street and liked our little production better than the huge Huntington Theater production. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but I kind of am. Because none of us were equity actors, you know, and it was so much fun. Anyway, I played the melancholy Jacques. Now, Jacques is kind of a, you know, he's kind of a curmudgeon. He's a little bit maybe of a misanthrope and a misogynist and a loner. Nobody gets the best of Jacques. He's very educated, and usually if you try to verbally joust with him, you lose. But he loses and gets made to look like a fool by Touchstone, the clown, the jester. So I've seen productions where after this little exchange between Touchstone and Jacques, where Touchstone exits, giving him that. And then Jacques alone. And he wants to laugh, but he's such a curmudgeon that he won't allow himself to laugh. But finally he does laugh. He doesn't realize that Duke Sr., who's been banished to the Forest of Arden to live like Robin Hood of old, he doesn't realize Duke Sr. and his men have just watched him laugh. So he's kind of caught off guard. He has to explain to them why he's laughing. And he goes into his a fool! A fool! I met a fool in the forest. Motley fool, miserable world. As I do live by food, I met a fool who laid him down and basked him in the sun and railed on Lady Fortune in good terms, in good set terms, and yet a motley fool. Good morrow, fool, quoth I. Now, sir, quoth he, call me not fool, till heaven hath sent me fortune. Then he drew a dial from his poke, and looking at it with lackluster eye, says very wisely, it is 10 o'clock. 'Tis but an hour ago since it was 9, and after 1 hour more 'twill be 11. And so, from hour to hour, we ripe, and then from hour to hour, we rot and rot, and thereby hangs a tale. When I did hear the noble fool thus moral on time, my lungs began to crow like chanticleer, that fools should be so deep contemplative, and I did laugh sans intermission hour by his dial. O noble fool, no worthy fool. Oh. That I were a fool. I am ambitious for a motley coat. Invest me in my motley. Give me leave to speak my mind, and I will through and through cleanse the foul body of the infected world, if they will patiently receive my medicine. And Shakespeare, of course, has the most famous lines in all of Shakespeare, and you've all heard them, I know. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with satchel, shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with the woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then the soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous and on a sudden and quick and quarrel, seeking the bubbled reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, fair round belly, with good capon line, with eyes severe, and beard of formal cut, full of wysaws and instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age slips into the lean and slitted pantaloon with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. The last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans taste, sans eyes, sans everything. All right, I have a couple more pieces. I'm getting conscious of the time. I know they close at 8. So, King Lear. King Lear, at the beginning of the play, Lear is old. You know, I think the text even tells you he's in his mid-80s. I think it's in the text, if I'm not mistaken. So he's still vital, he still has plenty of energy, but he convinces himself that he's getting old and he shouldn't be king anymore. He doesn't have any sons, he's got 3 daughters. So he decides that he will divide up his kingdom between his 3 daughters. But like a jackass, excuse my language, he wants his 3 daughters to make professions of their love in front of the court. So Regan gets up there first and he says, how much do you, this is paraphrasing, but how much do you love me? Oh, Daddy, I love you more than the sun, the moon, and the stars. You can't begin to imagine how much I love you. All right, loving, dutiful daughter, you get this portion of the kingdom. And then Goneril gets up there, how much do you love me? And Goneril says, take what my sister said and multiply that 10 times and then multiply that 100 times, and you don't come close to how much I love you, Daddy. All right, you get this third of the kingdom. And then he looks at his youngest daughter, whose name is Cordelia, and he says, how much do you love me? And she says, I love you as a daughter should love a father, no more, no less. And he gets irate. And he says to her, you have nothing else to say? And she says, nothing. And he famously says, nothing will come of nothing. And then he banishes her. He goes back to the drawing, and he gives up half of her amount to Regan and half to Goneril, with one caveat, that he's always able to keep 100 soldiers and knights with him while he's king emeritus. And he'll go around and live in his different little castles and his you know, his beach house and his ski chalet, but he can always have these 100 nights. Well, one night after a little bit too much drinking and partying at Goneril's castle, I believe, and her husband, the next morning, Goneril and Regan are pretty upset. And they say, listen, Dad, you don't need 100 nights. You don't. You really only need 50. In fact, you don't need 50. You really only need 25. In fact, you don't need any. And he responds, oh, reason, not the need. Our basest beggars are in the poorest thing superfluous. Allow not nature more than nature needs. Man's life's cheap as beasts. Thou art a lady. If only to go warm were gorgeous, why nature needs not what thou gorgeous wearest, which scarcely keeps thee warm. But for truer need, you heavens, give me that patience, patience I need. You see before you a man as full of grief as age, wretched in both. If it be you, stirs these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely. And let not women's weapons, water drops, stain my man's cheeks. Give me that noble anger. No, you wretched hags, I will have such revenges on you that all the world shall. I will do such things. You know what they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terror of the world. You think I'll weep, I'll not weep, though I have full cause for weeping. This heart shall break into 100,000 natural flaws, or ere I'll weep. Oh, fool, I think I shall go mad. So most scholars believe Shakespeare's last play was The Tempest. All right, and most scholars believe that Shakespeare used the character of Prospero, in a sense, as a mouthpiece, so that he could talk about Shakespeare's feelings about a lot of things: metaphysics, theology, life, love, the whole gamut. All right, now, Prospero has been usurped by his younger brother. It's always the younger brothers that usurp the older brothers in Shakespeare. It's true. The same thing in As You Like It. Duke Sr. gets usurped by his younger brother. So Prospero's kind of sick of all the machinations of the world anyway, and he's not so upset that he's being, banished to this island. The only people on the island are his daughter Miranda, a spirit, a sprite named Ariel, and a half-fish, half-man monster named Caliban. Now, Miranda's getting older, and he realizes that he can't just leave her there with them, and that's it. So he's a sorcerer and a wizard. He uses his wizardry and sorcery to cause a shipwreck. And all these people get washed up on the shore. One of them, a young, handsome man named Ferdinand, the son of the King of Naples. And Miranda lays eyes on him and falls in love with him, given the fact that the only other men she's looked at are Caliban and her father, and he falls in love with her. Now, Prospero, like a good parent, puts Ferdinand through all these tests, and he passes them all with flying colors. So then Prospero lets them have a wedding ceremony, and he uses his sorcery to conjure up these sprites, these spirits that are going to perform a mask. Midway through the mask, he remembers the threat that Caliban imposed. And so just as quickly as he made the spirits appear, he makes them disappear. He must see a look of consternation in Ferdinand's face, because he says to him, "You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. These our revels now are ended. Our actors, as I foretold, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inhabit shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. And our little life is rounded with a sleep. Oh, sir, vexed. My old brain is troubled. Bear with my weakness. Be not disturbed by my infirmities. If you be pleased, retire to my cell a while and there repose. A turn or two I'll take to still this troubled mind. And then the play ends after that pretty quickly. And Prospero closes his book on wizardry and sorcery, and Shakespeare closes up his career as an actor, playwright, and a member of the Lord Chamberlain's men under Queen Elizabeth and the King's men under James I. And I think he must have been looking back at his childhood. And he went to a school called the King School. And there was a disciplinarian teacher by the name of Simon Hunt. And it makes me think of Feste's closing song from Twelfth Night. When that I was and a little bitty boy, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, a foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came to man's estate, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, 'gainst knaves and thieves men shut their gate, for the rain it raineth every day. But when it was I came to wive, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, by swaggering could I never thrive, for the rain it raineth every day. A great while ago the world begun, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, but that's all one, our play is done, and we'll strive to please you every day. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear, and this weak and idle theme no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest puck, if we have unearned luck now to escape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long, else the puck a liar call. So, good night unto you all. Give me your hands, if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. I hope I can come back with Whistler at some point. Very different for me. Usually I do literary characters, you know, like I have Whitman and Shakespeare, and I do a show called Irish Voices where I do Yeats and Joyce and Seamus Heaney and Frank McCord. But this Whistler piece, does anybody know about his life? He was really, really an interesting man. I mean, one critic, you know, really gave him a horrendously bad review, and there was this art opening, and there's all these, you know, Victorian ladies in beautiful dresses, and, you know, he walks up to the critic that gave him the bad review. Boom! He cold conks him right in the opening, you know. He sued the leading critic of the day was a guy named Ruskin, John Ruskin. He wrote that famous book, The Stones of Venice. He sued him for defamation of character. He won the suit. His award was 1 farthing. That's what they awarded him. So anyway, well, I'm so glad. Bryce sleeping? Bryce is, he's getting ready to be the whining schoolboy. Yeah. I'm really, you know, he made a couple of, you know, little groans, but he was wonderful.
He was copying
Yeah.
a little bit of it.
He was what?
He was copying a
Yeah, what, I said something and he repeated it. What did I say?
Oh.
Whoa!
It's a quick study.
All right, Bryce. Yeah, so, listen, I have cards that I bring with me all the time. If anybody, knows a high school English teacher or a college professor, or if you belong to a women's group that has tea, or a men's group that has Irish whiskey. I've got cards, I've got about 8 or 9 of them. So if anybody would like my card, my website is on here. And so I want to thank you all. And I can get home just in time to watch Rachel Maddow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.